The first thing my attorney said to me wasn't congratulations. It wasn't you deserve this. It was, don't tell your husband's family. Not yet. Let me show you something first. I remember sitting in his office, still wearing the blazer I'd thrown on after the hospital called. My uncle, my mother's brother, the only person in my life who had ever treated me like I was worth something, had passed away 3 days earlier, quietly, in a hospice room that smelled like disinfectant and old flowers. I hadn't even known he was sick until it was almost over. His name was Warren. He'd never married, never had children. He drove a beat-up Chevy pickup and kept a vegetable garden in his backyard in rural Tennessee. He also, as it turned out, had spent 40 years quietly accumulating assets that nobody in the family knew about. Not even me. My attorney, his name is Gerald Oates, 60-something, papers stacked everywhere, the kind of man who looks like he's seen everything twice, slid a document across his desk. A trust, established in 1994, with my name on it, my name. Not my mother's, not my brother's, mine. The estate, Gerald said, including the land holdings, the investment accounts, and the property in Colorado, comes to approximately $2.4 million. I stared at the paper. I didn't understand it. I'm a kindergarten teacher from outside Knoxville. I have student loans. I buy the store brand cereal. $2.4 million didn't belong in the same sentence as my name. Why me? I asked. Gerald folded his hands. Your uncle left a letter. I'll give it to you before you go. But first, he paused. I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Okay, does your husband's family know about this? I shook my head. I didn't even know about it. He nodded slowly, like that was exactly what he'd expected. Good, and I need you to keep it that way, for now. I almost laughed. Why? Because, Gerald said, I've been doing this for 38 years, and I've learned something about inheritance. The moment money appears, people show you who they really are. And right now, you don't know who that is yet. I thought he was being overly cautious, sweet maybe, but overly cautious. My husband's name is Todd. No, wait. My husband's name is not important for what I'm about to tell you. What's important is his mother, his sister. The way they had circled me for the 4 years I'd been married into that family, like they were waiting for something I didn't know I was holding. I drove home that evening not saying a word. My mother-in-law had a way of smiling that never reached her eyes. I'd noticed it at my wedding. I noticed it every Thanksgiving. I noticed it the Sunday afternoon I came home from Gerald's office and found her already sitting at my kitchen table, a cup of my coffee in her hand, talking to my husband like she lived there. Her name is Barb, short for Barbara, but she corrects people who call her that. She's the kind of woman who redecorates other people's houses and calls it helping. There she is, she said when I walked in. We were starting to wonder. I set my bag down, smiled, said something about traffic. My husband looked at me the way he always does when his mother is in the room. A little apologetic, a little helpless, like he's caught between two weather systems and hoping neither one notices him. His name is Todd and I love him. I want to make that clear. What happened is not about Todd. It's about what Todd's family did while I wasn't looking. Gerald had told me to wait 2 weeks, to keep the trust quiet, to watch. I didn't fully understand why until the 3rd day. That's when my sister-in-law, her name is Shauna, 2 years younger than Todd, lives 20 minutes away and acts like she lives inside our marriage, called me out of the blue. Hey, so I heard about your uncle, she said. No condolences, just that. Thank you, I said carefully. Did he leave you anything? The question came so fast it almost knocked the air out of me. Warren had been dead less than a week. I hadn't posted anything online. I hadn't told anyone except Todd, and I'd only told him that there was a will being read, nothing specific. I'm not sure yet, I said. The estate is still being sorted. Oh, she said, and I could hear something shift in her voice. Not disappointment exactly, more like recalculation. Well, let us know if you need anything. That night I lay awake and thought about what Gerald had said. The moment money appears, people show you who they really are. I called him the next morning. Tell me what to do, I said. He was quiet for a moment then. I need you to do something uncomfortable. Gerald's plan was simple, almost too simple. He wanted me to tell my husband's family that my uncle had died with significant debt, that the estate was going to creditors, that there was nothing left, and that I was actually going to be dealing with some of the fallout. He wanted me to seem like I was in trouble. I know it sounds strange, he said, but I've seen this situation before, not with these exact people but with people like them. Trust me. I asked him why it mattered. The trust was already in my name. It was legally mine. What could they possibly do? He said, in Tennessee, marital assets can get complicated depending on documentation and timing. If they believe you have nothing, they'll stop pushing. If they believe you have something, they'll start pulling. And you need to see which one they are before you make any decisions about your future. I told Todd that night, not the plan, just that the estate was complicated, that Uncle Warren had apparently left behind some debts, and that things weren't looking great. I watched my husband's face closely. He looked genuinely sorry. He hugged me. He said, whatever you need, we'll figure it out. That part was real. Todd was real. What happened the next 48 hours was something else entirely. I don't know exactly how Barb found out. I think Todd mentioned it, not to be cruel, just because he doesn't know how to hold things in around his mother. That's always been true. By the time Friday came around, she had apparently told Shauna. And Shauna had told Shauna's boyfriend, and by Saturday morning, I woke up to 3 texts that changed everything. The first was from Shauna. Mom wants to know if you've talked to a financial advisor. She has someone she trusts. The second was from a number I didn't recognize. Hi, this is Denise at Coldwell Banker. Barb Hutchins referred me. She mentioned you might be interested in discussing the value of your current home. The third was from Barb herself, sent at 6:47 a.m. Sweetie, I think we should all sit down and talk about what the next steps look like for you and Todd, financially speaking. I know someone who handles estate debts, and I think it would be good for both of you to understand your options. Don't do anything without talking to us first. Don't do anything without talking to us first. I sat on the edge of the bed and read that sentence 4 times. Then I screenshotted everything and sent it to Gerald. He called me within the hour. There it is, he said, and he didn't sound surprised. He sounded the way someone sounds when they've been right about something they never wanted to be right about. Don't respond to any of them. I'm going to need you to do one more thing. Gerald asked me to agree to a family dinner, 1 week out, at Barb's house. Let them think you're overwhelmed and looking for help, he said. Let them lead the conversation. Don't agree to anything, don't sign anything. Don't let them make any calls on your behalf, and do not go alone. Who do I bring? He said. I'll come as a family friend. They don't need to know I'm your attorney. Not yet. I almost said no. It felt like a lot, like something out of a movie I hadn't agreed to be in. But then I thought about that text. Don't do anything without talking to us first. Sent at 6:47 in the morning, while I was still asleep, while she was already moving. I said yes. That week was the longest of my life. I went to work. I taught letters and read picture books, and helped 22 5-year-olds learn to write their names. I came home. I cooked dinner. I watched Todd watch television, and I thought about how he had no idea what his family was doing in the dark. I thought about my uncle a lot that week. Warren had taught me to fish when I was 7. He'd driven 3 hours to be at my college graduation even though he hated crowds. He had never once asked me for anything, not once in 31 years. And then he'd left me everything he had, quietly, without warning, without wanting any credit for it. He'd known something about people, he must have. Because he chose me and not my mother. He chose me and not my brother. He'd watched this family for 4 years and decided I was the one who could handle what he was leaving behind. I wasn't going to let him down. The dinner was set for a Thursday. Barb made her pot roast, which she only makes when she's trying to soften something. Shauna was there, and Shauna's boyfriend, whose name I can never remember, and Todd's aunt, who drives down from Chattanooga for anything that feels like a gathering. Gerald arrived 5 minutes after we did, introduced himself as an old family friend of my uncle's. Which was technically true. He had handled Warren's legal affairs for 15 years, and Barb accepted this with a smile that tightened slightly around the edges. The conversation started casual. How was I holding up? How was work? Did I want wine? The pot roast was good. It's always good. That's the thing about Barb. She's not a bad person at the surface. She's warm. She remembers birthdays. She brought me soup when I had a sinus infection 2 winters ago. But then dessert came and she folded her hands and said, "We should talk about the elephant in the room." She looked at Todd when she said it. "Not me, Todd. Your wife is going through a hard time," she said to my husband, like I wasn't sitting right there. "And we want to help." That's what family does. Mom, Todd said carefully. "She's right here, I know she is." Barb finally looked at me. "Sweetheart, we've been talking, and we think, given the situation with the estate, with the debts coming in, It would make sense to think proactively about your assets. Jointly, I repeated. You and Todd own this house together, right? The equity you've built, it's real. And if there are creditors coming after your uncle's estate, you want to make sure that's protected, properly structured. Shauna leaned in. My contact at the bank has a product that would let you roll the equity into a protected account. Under Todd's name. Just temporarily, just until the estate clears. Under Todd's name. I felt Gerald shift almost imperceptibly beside me. A tiny adjustment of his posture. A signal. That's very thoughtful, I said. I kept my voice even. Can I see whatever paperwork that would involve? Barb reached into the tote bag she'd set beside her chair, and she had it ready. She'd had it ready the whole time, and pulled out a manila folder. Clean, crisp, tabbed. She slid it across the table to me. I opened it. Read the first paragraph, the second. It was a spousal asset transfer agreement. If I signed it, Todd would have primary control over the equity in our home, the only other significant asset I owned outside of the trust they didn't know about. My hands were perfectly still. The way this is written, I said slowly, Todd would have unilateral decision-making authority over the property. That's standard protective language, Shauna said quickly. I don't think it is, I said. Gerald set down his coffee cup. Very gently. May I? He said, and reached for the folder. The table went quiet. He read for about 30 seconds. Then he looked up. This isn't a protective transfer, he said calmly. This is a relinquishment of your ownership interest. If she signed this, she'd be a non-owning resident of her own home. Barb's smile stayed on, but something behind it flickered. Gerald, with respect, this isn't really any of your. I'm her attorney, Gerald said. That sentence landed like a stone in still water. Shauna looked at Barb. Barb looked at Todd. Todd looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Something between confusion and the beginning of understanding. Her attorney, Barb said. Yes, and I think you should know that the estate you've been discussing this week, the debt you've been so concerned about, doesn't exist. There is no debt. There is, however, a trust. In your daughter-in-law's name. Funded and distributed. And any attempt to transfer, redirect, or acquire any portion of her assets, including this, Gerald tapped the folder, would constitute a legal problem I think none of you want. The room was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator. Shauna's boyfriend pushed back from the table like he wanted to physically exit the situation. Barb opened her mouth, closed it. You're not in debt, Todd said to me. His voice was very low. No, I said. Gerald asked me to wait. To watch. I looked at him steadily. And now we know. What happened next wasn't a screaming match. That surprised me. I had expected anger, defenses going up, someone slamming a hand on the table. Instead, what I got was something quieter and somehow worse. Barb started to cry. We were trying to protect you, she said. Both of you. That folder was prepared before this dinner, I said. Before you knew what we were walking in here to talk about. She didn't answer. Tabbed and organized, I said. You planned this. We just wanted to make sure Todd is my husband, I said, not your asset. Shauna slapped the table then. Not hard, but enough. You don't get to talk to her like that. I haven't raised my voice, I said. This whole thing is manipulative, Shauna snapped. You tricked us. You brought a lawyer to a family dinner. You brought a legally binding document to a family dinner, Gerald said mildly. Todd stood up. I don't know exactly what I expected him to do. I think somewhere in the back of my mind I was afraid he'd take their side. I was afraid the version of him that existed before I walked into his life would override the person I'd been building a home with for 4 years. I was afraid that blood would win. Everyone needs to stop, he said. His mother looked at him. Todd, no, he said it firmly. Without anger, but without any room in it either. Mom, did you actually draw up papers to transfer her house out of her name? Silence. Because I need an answer. It was meant to be temporary. That is not an answer. Barb's chin trembled. We thought if the estate had problems, you'd need to be protected. She is my wife, Todd said. She doesn't need to be protected from her own marriage. And you don't get to make decisions about our home. It was the first time in 4 years I had ever heard him say that to her. I don't think I breathed for a full 10 seconds. Gerald drove me home that night. Todd stayed back at his mother's house, not to take her side, but because there was a conversation that needed to happen without me in the room. He texted me halfway through. This is going to take a while. I love you. I'm sorry. 3 words I had needed to hear, especially the middle one. Gerald pulled into my driveway and put the car in park. I need to tell you something, he said. He reached into his briefcase and produced a letter. Handwritten. My uncle's loop, small and careful, on cream-colored stationery. He asked me to hold this, Gerald said, until you'd seen what you needed to see. I broke the seal. The paper smelled faintly like his house. Cedar and coffee and something I couldn't name. You are going to be told at some point in your life that you are too sensitive, that you trust too easily, that you see the best in people when you should be more careful. I want to tell you that I watched you for 30 years, and I saw something different. I saw someone who knows exactly who people are, and chooses kindness anyway. That's not naivety. That's the hardest kind of strength there is. The trust is yours. Not because you need it, because you earned it, by being the person your mother's side of this family never managed to produce. Don't let anyone tell you that protecting yourself is the same as being unkind. Sometimes love has limits, and sometimes knowing where your limits are is the most loving thing you can do. I am proud of you. I have always been proud of you. I sat in Gerald's car for a long time after that. The streetlight was doing something orange and soft through the windshield. My hands were still holding the paper. He knew, I said finally. He knew they would try something. He suspected, Gerald said. That's why he came to me. That's why he structured the trust the way he did, with language specifically protecting it from spousal claims and in-law interference. He'd been thinking about this for years. Uncle Warren, who drove a beat-up Chevy, who grew tomatoes, who had never in his life made a fuss about anything. He built a wall around me, I said, and handed you the keys, Gerald said. In the weeks that followed, things moved in pieces. Barb never fully apologized. That's the honest truth. She said she was sorry if things came across the wrong way, which is the kind of apology that's really just a complaint about your reaction dressed up in polite language. Shauna sent me a text saying she hoped we could move forward, which I read twice and then set down. Todd was different. Todd sat with me at the kitchen table the night after the dinner and asked me to tell him everything. Not just the trust in the attorney and the plan, but what it had felt like. To watch his family circle around me. To feel something wrong for years without having language for it. He cried a little. He's not someone who cries easily, and I didn't expect it. I should have seen it, he said. You didn't know what you were looking for, I said. I should have anyway. That was the beginning of something new between us. Not easier exactly, but more honest. We bought out the equity in our home, using a portion of the inheritance, so the house was fully in both of our names, with no ambiguity, no vulnerability. Gerald drew up updated documents. Everything was clean, clear, protected. I took a leave of absence from teaching in the spring. Flew out to Colorado to see the property my uncle had left me, a small piece of land outside Durango, backed up against the national forest, with an old farmhouse on it that needed work and smelled like pine and dry grass and everything I'd ever wanted. I stood on the porch and understood something. Warren had never given me anything frivolous. Everything he ever gave me, his time, his attention, his truck when my car broke down at 22, was practical, useful. The land was the same way. It wasn't about wealth. It wasn't about winning. It was about having somewhere to stand that nobody could move you from. Barb still comes to holiday dinners. Todd and I decided that together, that we wouldn't cut her out entirely, but that we would set limits she could feel. She doesn't come to the house unannounced anymore. She stopped offering financial advice. Shauna and I are cordial in the way that two people can be cordial when they both know the truth about what happened and have agreed without words to live around it. Some people ask me if I feel bad about the plan, about letting them believe I was in trouble, about watching them reveal themselves. I think about that sometimes. I think about whether I would have rather not known, whether there's a version of my life where I sign whatever document they put in front of me and just live inside the not knowing. And then I think about that letter, my uncle's handwriting, the way he said, knowing where your limits are is the most loving thing you can do. He spent decades watching people mistake silence for peace and compliance for kindness. He spent his whole life being underestimated, and at the end of it he didn't leave a message of bitterness. He left me land and money and a very good attorney and a single instruction. See clearly, then act. I keep the letter in the farmhouse in Colorado. In a small cedar box on the kitchen windowsill, next to a photograph of the two of us from when I was 9. Me holding a fishing rod I clearly had no idea what to do with, him laughing with his whole face the way he always did. I look at it every time I'm there, which is more and more often now. What my aunt by marriage tried to take from me, and what my uncle made sure she couldn't. It was never really about the money. It was about knowing that someone had looked at me, all of me, and decided I was worth protecting. That's not something you can put in a trust, but it helps to have the land.